Chapter 9. That night it started to rain in earnest, and Martha dreamed she was Elizabeth Bedford. She drifted off restlessly, lulled by the dull thudding of rain against the window pane. Yet once sleep took over, she lay there with the strangest sensation of wakefulness, as if part of herself was trapped inside her mind, while the other part waited in the terror of reality. She dreamed she was dying. She felt each stab of the knife going through her, and everywhere she turned there were blood-splattered walls, and her killer was real, but she couldn't see his face because he was wearing a mask. Yet she knew him. In her absolute terror, she knew him and knew she had trusted him with her life. In the depths of her dreams, she screamed, and suddenly it was real. Someone was holding her, and she was safe at last, in a pair of strong, steady arms. "Martha, it's only a dream. You're okay." And Connor was there, and his arms were around her, and the light spilling in from the hall was safe and real. "I'm dead," Martha whispered, and she began to cry, and Connor held her tighter and rocked her. "No, it was only a nightmare. Go back to sleep." "I'm scared," Martha said, but her voice was muffled against his bare shoulder, and sleep was a deep, deep sea pulling her down. "Then I'll stay," Connor said, "far, far away," and she sank into stillness at last. When morning came, she felt drained and exhausted. She couldn't remember what had been a dream and what had been real, and she was embarrassed to go into the kitchen. Connor was at the table drinking coffee, scanning a newspaper. Martha slipped groggily into her chair. "I'm never going to school again," she announced. Connor lowered one corner of the paper, raised an eyebrow, disappeared behind the financial section once more. "I'm not," she repeated sullenly. "I can't face anyone ever again. I thought we got all this straightened out yesterday. You've been facing them all this time." "Martha, nothing's different." "It's different," she insisted. "I look like a dead girl. You just need sleep." "I look like Elizabeth Bedford." "That's not what you told me," Wynne said. "She didn't say you look like her. She said you reminded her of. No wonder everyone's been staring at me. No wonder I feel like such a freak. They're staring at you because you're new and you never talk to anyone. I live in her house and I look like her too." Martha caught her breath sharply. "Did I have a nightmare last night?" "Yes." "Oh no," Martha covered her face with her hands. So Connor had been there. She'd never be able to face him again. "You can come out," Connor said. "I won't look at you if you don't want me to." He sounded like he was trying not to laugh, and Martha pointedly ignored him. "I'm not staying in Elizabeth's room," she said. "If we're going to switch permanently, I need to move my things. Don't you realize how serious this is? I feel doomed." Her voice dropped dramatically, and Connor laid the paper down. "You're scaring yourself. You know that, don't you?" Martha hesitated, gave a guilty nod. "But don't you think the coincidences are just too weird? Blake said Elizabeth was being harassed, and..." She trailed off, frowning down at the untouched bowl of cornflakes Connor had waiting for her. "You're not Elizabeth," Connor said, not unkindly. "Your life isn't her life." "No, hers is over." Martha glanced up at him, then shrugged. "There's so much I don't understand. Blake and Wynne both say Dennis was a jerk, but Wynne says he really loved Elizabeth and wouldn't have hurt her." Connor toyed with his cup, the handle going back and forth between his fingers. "So how would Wynne know?" "I was thinking about that," Martha said. "Wynne probably knew him better than most people because she was Elizabeth's best friend, and best friends tell each other everything. Elizabeth probably told her lots about Dennis, and Blake probably spent just as much time with him at school. They had classes together, and they were teammates." Blake said Dennis was a dirty player. "He was an ace player. They both were. Every article I came across when I checked out the newspapers that day couldn't say enough about the two of them. They were the top scorers. I wouldn't be surprised if they were top rivals too." Martha nodded glumly, and then Elizabeth started going out with Blake after she and Dennis broke up. "You didn't tell me that yesterday." "I guess I forgot." Connor glanced at her, the eyebrow lifting again. "Eat your cereal. I'll go fish out the car." "Is it that bad?" "Probably. It rained all night, and it hasn't stopped yet." Great, Martha mumbled. It matches my mood. The day dragged on relentlessly. Walking down the halls was pure torture. She was sure everyone could see fear and Elizabeth Bedford written in everyone's eyes. She had quizzes in 3 classes that she wasn't prepared for, and when Greg questioned her on a reading assignment, she realized she'd studied the wrong chapters. In between, she managed to knock over a bottle of hand lotion in her locker, spotting most of her books with grease. When she realized there were papers due in her last 2 classes that she didn't have done, she leaned her head on her locker, feeling too hopeless to even cry, and never even noticed that Blake had come up beside her. "Hi," he grinned. "You look like you could use a change of scene." After the initial leap, Martha's heart settled sickeningly in her stomach. She thought of what Wynne had told her about Blake and Elizabeth Bedford, and she concentrated on rearranging her locker. "Well, it was nice while it lasted. What's the matter? Can't stand to tear yourself away from this place?" He slid his hand beneath her elbow and bent close to her ear. "I have to pick up some stuff for Wynne's decorating committee. Why don't you cut class and come with me?" Martha felt shivers up her spine as his chin brushed the side of her face. "I can't just not go to class. Blake drew back, disappointed. "It'll be a chance to show you some of the scenery. Come on, who's gonna know?" "Oh, I don't know. Say you got sick." "But Connor, he'll be waiting after school." "I'll get a message to him. One of the secretaries owes me a favor," he winked. "I'll have you safe at home by the time Connor gets there. Cross my heart." Martha looked into his eyes, his persuasive grin. "Well, what do I have to do, beg?" Blake laughed then, and the last of her defenses crumbled. "Okay, great. Let me give the word to Terry, and I'll meet you by the gate. 5 minutes." It was still raining when she went outside, a steady stream turning the world to a gray, soggy mess. Martha had scarcely reached the gate when Blake was beside her, shielding her head with a notebook as he guided her to a van. Within minutes, they were warm and cozy, and Martha settled back, allowing herself a luxurious sigh. "Bad day?" Blake seemed genuinely concerned, and Martha gave a wry smile. "Bad day? Bad week, bad month, bad life." She glanced away then, laughing to herself. "Sorry. I'm not very good company. I'm not like Elizabeth." "Hey," Blake leaned over, his fingers on her arm. "Would I have kidnapped you if I believed that?" Martha half smiled. "Thanks for asking me to come." "My pleasure," Blake inclined his head and then fastened his eyes back on the road. "We're going to Whitley. It's about 20 miles. You'll like it. Nice old buildings, smaller than Bedford, so there's more countryside. My grandparents used to have a farm there, but they sold it to my cousins before they died. Do you ever go back there to see it?" "Sure, that's where we're headed now. My mom goes every week to pick up vegetables. They're always canning for us." I wish Sally would learn about good food." "Who's Sally?" "Oh, Connor's mother. You like her?" "She's okay. She's an artist, and she's kind of a slob most of the time. But I think her work must be pretty good. She's in galleries in New York and places like that." "No kidding? You guys really are famous." "Hardly." Martha looked out at the bleary trees and rain-beaten meadows. "My mother died 2 years ago," she said softly. "She wasn't at all like Sally." Blake's eyes fell upon her face, his smile sad. "I'm really sorry, Martha." "Oh," she waved him away, a laugh catching in her throat. "Don't be. Hey, I have a brand new family now." "Lucky me." "You are lucky." His voice sounded so serious that she glanced up in surprise. "Connor seems like someone you can depend on. Believe me, that means a lot." And before she could ask him what he meant, he broke into his carefree grin. "Hey, what'd I tell you? Small town USA." As the van began its descent into a narrow valley, Martha straightened in her seat to get a better view. A little village lay before them, roofs, chimney tops, and one white church spire, all postcard perfect through the veil of rain. Blake slowed to a crawl and began identifying things along the way. Feed store, market, post office, garage. Several old men in overalls, recognizing the car, gave a lackadaisical waves, and Blake honked the horn in reply, swerving as a mangry dog took its time crossing in front of them. "Feel like you're in a time warp?" Blake teased. "Actually, it feels very nice." "Good. I don't want to bore you, even if the decorating committee is counting on me." "What are they decorating for?" "The Halloween dance." At Martha's questioning look, Blake struck his palm against his forehead in mock alarm. "What? At Bedford nearly a week, and so uninformed?" He wagged an accusing finger at her. You haven't been reading the posters in the halls? Martha's mind raced. There had been something. She remembered now. Some announcement about a dance on a big orange posters all over the school, but she hadn't really paid much attention to them. Why should I? I won't be going. She glanced sheepishly at Blake. I sort of remember. Aha! Well, it's Sunday night this year, and they're giving us Monday off. The party's an annual thing. Probably the reason nobody thought to enlighten you. Martha stared at him, something gelling in her memory. A party? Like the one last year? The last time you saw Elizabeth alive? Yes, Blake said quietly. He didn't look at her again until they were several more miles past town, and Martha felt the van slowing down. This is it! Blake hopped out to unfasten a gate, blocking a dirt road, and presently, they pulled up in front of a farmhouse. Are you sure we should drop in like this? Martha asked anxiously, but Blake was already opening her door. Oh, there's nobody home. They're in the city today. Come on. He took her hand and they ran across a muddy stretch of yard to a huge barn. The warm, dusty interior felt wonderful after their dash through the rain. As Martha squeezed water from her hair, Blake pulled some blankets from a stall and tucked one around her shoulders, using one frayed corner to wipe raindrops from her cheek. Martha looked away, flustered. Hope you're not susceptible to pneumonia, Blake teased. I'm drenched. He walked off a short distance and shrugged out of his jacket. See up there? Martha looked where he pointed and saw a high open loft heaped with mounds of hay. We used to have contests, Greg and I. We'd jump off and see who could land the furthest away. You could have killed yourselves. You're right, he chuckled, and Win always told on us. Come on. Before Martha could protest, he took her hand and started up the ladder. Blake, what are you? Relax, he laughed. I want you to see the view. I used to think I was on top of the world up here. The blanket fell from her shoulders as she grasped the ladder and started up. As her head cleared the platform, she saw Blake wrestling with the doors. A fine spray of wind wetting his face as he stood looking out at the sodden landscape. Here, he motioned her close and swept one arm out in front of him. See that? There were even fewer houses over there when we were kids. You could see for miles and miles, and it was only fields. Martha stood beside him, shivering in the piercing dampness. The town and valley lay at their feet, a checkerboard of dark green and rusty brown and gold, the hills muted and bare woodlands swathed in gray. Cold, in spite of her efforts to hide it, Blake noticed her shaking and promptly shut the doors. Oh, don't do that. No, it's cozier this way. He grinned and threw himself down on the hay, making a place beside him. There's room for one more. Martha hesitated and Blake's smile widened. He lay back, head pillowed on his arms, and Martha gave in and sat down. Overhead, the rain had settled to a gentle rhythm, and a sudden growl of thunder faded miles and miles away. Does it make you sad? Martha stole a look at him, having things change, thinking maybe someday you might have to leave this? Are you kidding? I want to leave it. I can't wait to leave it. Martha leaned back, regarding him in astonishment. But I thought you said, I know, and sure I love this place, but what kind of a future would I have if I stuck around here? His laugh was almost an afterthought. I wouldn't stand a chance in hell of ever being anything. Martha studied him a moment. The grim lines that had formed suddenly around his mouth, the flash of anger in his eyes. What kind of anything? She asked gently. The hard look vanished, replaced almost immediately by a fierce gleam of hope. Do you know how close I am to a basketball scholarship? So close I can taste it, Martha. I've got the reputation in the grades, and I can hear it's a pretty sure thing. He paused, letting the words sink in. A sure thing? Martha looked down at her fingers clasped tightly in her lap. The silence was long before Blake spoke again. You think I'm selfish for wanting it so bad, don't you? But you don't know how it is here, how people are just waiting for you to fail and be stuck here like them for the rest of your life. God, I'd do anything to get away. He turned his head so that his eyes rested full on her face. They looked deep and sad. Basketball's my ticket out of here. Martha, it's what I really want. What I really want to do, to be. She couldn't look away from that urgent stare, and suddenly his hand was on her arm, his fingers sliding up under her sleeve. I don't usually go around making true confessions to everyone I meet. His laugh was embarrassed, but Martha gave him a reassuring smile. And I don't pass on true confessions, so you don't need to worry. His hand tightened on her wrist. Slowly he drew her down so that their faces were only inches apart. You're really something, he said quietly, and there was only the soft patter of rain and the soft flutter of birds high in the rafters, and Blake's lips soft upon hers. Don't, Martha murmured, and her hand pushed weakly against his chest, her eyes hurt and confused. Why didn't you tell me I reminded you of Elizabeth?